All right, welcome. Today is October 20th, 2025. This is the Office of Public School Construction Stakeholder Meeting on the Facility Inspection Tool. I am Michael Watanabe, Deputy Executive Officer for the Office of Public School Construction. And here with me today is Brian Lepask, our Chief of Program Services. So this is unique, even though the item says Stakeholder Meeting Agenda 18, this is not related to Proposition 2 implementation. The purpose of today's meeting is to talk about potential revisions to the facility inspection tool as a result of audit recommendations by the California State Auditor in November of 2024. A copy of this entire agenda item, as well as the audit report, is available on OPSC's website on our meetings page if you'd like to follow along. So for today's meeting, we'll provide a little bit of background on the creation of FIT and how we got to where we are today in its current format. A brief overview on how to use the FIT for those who are not familiar with its current weighting and scoring mechanisms. We'll go over the California State Auditor's recommendations, and then a little bit different today, we are seeking stakeholders' feedbacks and all interested parties on the FIT, the auditor's recommendations and their feedback. And staff is not presenting any recommendations for changes at this time. We'll bring back something probably in the future based on everyone's feedback today. So we're intended to be more of an open discussion item. So we have questions for you as we go along. But as we do go along, like I said, if you have any questions, feel free to stop us. We do envision that there will be more follow-up meetings to this stakeholder meeting in the future. So if you're not on OPSC's email list, you can go to the contact page on our website to sign up, and then I'll keep you apprised of future stakeholder meetings as we work towards the goal of getting a final item or final recommendations to the State Allocation Board by June of 2026. All right. Just to see who's on and who's familiar with the FIT, using the Zoom functions, the raise hand in your interface, how many people use the OPSC specific version of the FIT right now? For those of you following along, we have roughly 90 attendees online. I see about 13 hands raised. All right, I'm going to lower hands. All right, slightly different question. How many people use a locally created instrument, kind of like the FIT, but locally created? All right, a little bit less. I see 4 hands raised. Thank you. All right, Brian will screen share the item so you can follow along if you don't have access to the item online. And we'll start at the beginning. So a little bit of background with the FIT for those who are new to it. Oops. The FIT is meant as a visual inspection tool that's used as an aid for school districts to assess if facilities are clean, safe, and functional. So in Education Code 17002 specifically, that's kind of important because a lot of the information and background of FIT is in that section. Define good repair based on the facility inspection tool or a local evaluation instrument that meets the same criteria. So currently in that statute, there are 19 areas that kind of set the minimum for evaluating a facility, and that must be included as part of your evaluation. So how was the FIT created and why? So this goes back into 2004 as part of Senate Bill 550, which established a good repair standard in response to the settlement of Williams versus California. And good repair, that was determined by an interim evaluation instrument at the time that OPSC created. So we created a draft form. The State Allocation Board approved that in January of 2005, and that was used briefly. Following that instrument, that IEI, OPSC drafted what we call the Good Repair Report, and that made recommendations to both the governor and the legislature, which formed the basis of AB 607 in 2006. And that updated the definition of good repair based on a permanent evaluation instrument for school facilities that included both component rankings and facility scoring. One of the requirements set in statute was that the local evaluation instrument that meets the minimum criteria could not require capital enhancements beyond the standards the facilities were designed to meet or designed and constructed as. So basically, you couldn't identify deficiency in your form just because the building no longer met current codes. So that was used. So what OPSC did in response to that legislation is in fall of 2006, we created a work group of experts and practitioners. I believe some of them actually in this meeting today that helped develop that permanent fit back in 2006. So the main goals of that work group were to create a fit that was more user-friendly, something that was easy to use, did not require a lot of expertise, also make it more functional. So a rating system that was easy to calculate, easy to understand, and easy to interpret. They also wanted some flexibility in there in terms of the rating system and the ability to provide comments and feedback too on the fit form. The components also included weighting to have a larger influence and promote more regular. The goal really was to make sure that we included components that would lead toward changes and corrections to promote more regular maintenance of those components. So after that work group met, they did take a draft form. It was tested in the field, resulted in additional modifications and adaptations. We then took that fit to what back in the time was called the implementation committee. And that worked much like today's stakeholder meeting, where we got stakeholder involvement from all over the state and different organizations. And they overwhelmingly approved that version. So we took that version of the fit to the state allocation board, and they approved the permanent version in June of 2007. If you'd like to see what that original permanent version looks like, it is on stamp page 15 to 23 of this particular agenda. Then continuing forward in time, in fall of 2008, we formed another work group to make adjustments to the fit. What we're finding, or what stakeholders are finding additional on with that permanent fit instrument, is there's a lot of bias in the ratings, a lot of pressure on inspectors. They had flexibility to downgrade ratings on their own and change it. So I guess you could say a little bit less objective. So that led to additional changes into the system. So after that, the work group created another version of the fit. What they found was that scoring system more closely aligned with actual facility conditions. So in May 2009, the board adopted that fit version, and we stuck with that for a good 12 years. Most recently, in 2021, Senate Bill 129 was passed and required OPSC take another look at the fit, but also consider the current standards listed in the Association of Physical Plant Administrators Operational Guidelines for Educational Facilities, APPA. For those of you who have looked at the California State Auditor's recommendations, they are also recommending changes that more closely align with those their handbooks as well. But what SB 129 did was require the board to adopt a new version of the fit, considering those guidelines prior to June 30th of 2022, so that it would be ready by July 1st for use. So we did have a series of meetings in 21 and 2022, and the board adopted an updated version of the fit as you see it today in April 2022. The main changes in 2022, we added a new cleanliness assessment worksheet, which broke down the cleanliness category into numerous other subfields. It was through the stakeholder process decided that this form would be optional, so you weren't required to use it, but you could use it to provide more detail to determine how you determine a facility is clean. Additionally, we added a lot more comment fields throughout the entire form so that every time there was some kind of notation, whether positive or negative, that the evaluator can add comments. Things like the square footage of the building, since that impacted, how clean a building could be. Quantity of students on the site, number of custodial maintenance staff on site, number of maintenance staff in the district, how many restrooms were on campus, things like that could impact the ability to keep a facility clean. Those are very similar ideas that impact a rating of a facility, and the CSA audit also noted those kind of differences that make out that staffing is a large impact to a facility cleanliness. So for those of you unfamiliar with the fit, Brian, we'll go to page 3. We'll just kind of give you a high-level overview of what the fit looks like if you haven't seen it before and how to use it. So the fit as it is right now has 8 groupings of the 15 components outlined in statute. So such as the systems, electrical, sewer, and what have you. So as a reviewer goes through the form, they will rate each of their buildings or campuses on three categories. And as you go on to page 4, Brian, you'll see a further breakdown of each of these categories and the things they evaluate. On page 5, they will choose one of 4 categories. So one, not applicable if it doesn't apply to your campus. Okay, there's no deficiency. D, if it's deficient, or X, if it's extreme deficiency. Now, the instructions on the form that lead up to this page, they'll give you more detail. There are certain criteria that will automatically make you extreme deficiency, such as a gas leak, for example. Things you need to work on right away. Once you score all those, each page by page, and then at the bottom of this page, Brian is showing there's also the cleanliness detail for an example. But once you score all those, they get totaled. And when you see that, that's on the middle of page 6. Based on the percentage of okay items compared to all areas rated, you'll determine percentages in each category. And based in the 8 components or the subcomponents, those get averaged out. So in this case, the first three columns is for the system category, electricals on its own. You'll see in cleanliness, it has 2 categories get averaged together. So the 100% and the 70% get averaged to 85%. Each of those 8 components get a percentage. And then based on that percentage, they get rated. At the bottom, the overall rating is based on the average of those 8 percentages. So the 82.85. So you can see what happens is that, multiple 100% will override a 0%, another category by nature of doing that to generate a higher percentage. So there's possibility for skewing there, but that's how the weighting was determined to be the most critical at the time in 2009 of what was most important. Based on the percentages, there's 3 levels of ranking: poor, fair, good, and I believe excellent as the 4 categories, and it's based on a sliding scale, and that's also in the instructions on the form. So that's the current version of the form. That's how we got to where we are today. I'll pause there for a second to see if anybody has any questions so far. All right, seeing none. We will go on to the current auditor's recommendations. The current audit recommendations are in this item as attachment F. You can read the report in its entirety. But what you'll find in there is the state auditor recommended that DGS engage in the stakeholder process by October 2025. Our target completion date by the auditor is October 2026. But their overall goals is to increase the accuracy of FIT reporting. So what they've summarized in this report, they visited 18 schools in 6 school districts throughout California. They looked at enrollment. They looked at urban, rural, suburban schools. They looked at free and reduced price percentage, and they tried to pick a handful of school districts, variety of schools that kind of meet a little bit of every part of those criteria to analyze the data and analyze what their FIT scores were, what was reported on their school accountability report cards. And I believe in all 18 cases, they believe that districts rated their schools higher than the scores that the CSA auditors believe the scores should have been. So what you'll see in that report is kind of a summary of all their findings. School districts did provide responses to those findings and their thoughts on the initial evaluations, and that came to their recommendations. So based on those 18 site visits, the report is basically recommending that OPSC make revisions to the FIT to increase the effectiveness of the inspection tool. They do not believe the FIT adequately considered the severity of deficiencies, that the existence of multiple deficiencies in the same area haven't been considered in the current evaluation tool, and that the FIT scores as they are now don't adequately communicate the magnitude of the cleanliness and maintenance concerns at the school. And then more specifically, they really think additional elements needed to be added to the FIT as part of the evaluation process. So as part of that inspection, a broader range of deficiency ratings. This specifically differentiates cosmetic deficiencies, versus minor deficiencies versus moderate and extreme deficiencies. They recommend that OPSC provide more guidance about scoring individual locations, and also that includes locations that have multiple deficiencies in the same section. They recommend that we update the scoring system. That removes the aggregation that you see now, where we had those 8 categories summarizing, subsections summarized out, break it into individual category ratings. And they recommend we include an additional guidance document for specialized learning environments like wood shops, welding areas, agriculture areas, a lot of things that you didn't see back in the past that are becoming more and more common. Mhm. So that's kind of some of the recommendations. That's kind of why we're here today. We're seeking stakeholder feedback on both your opinions of the audit, their findings, what you would recommend for particular changes to the fit. We are taking notes. We'll take all that information and try to look forward to, what might we make recommendations for in the future. Let's
Michael,
jump. Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
you do have one question that just came in. It says it's from Elia Wilkes. It says, can you please explain a little bit about how the scoring system works and its impact on funding allocated for the schools?
From a funding allocation standpoint, that is one of the things the California State Auditor pointed out that we aren't weighing in on, but they point out that a lot of reasons for the deficiency is the fit does not drive your funding at the school district level. Back in roughly 2015, they switched to a local control funding formula and they eliminated the deferred maintenance program and gave more discretionary control to school districts to how you spend your allocations. So they specifically pointed out in the CSA audit that there isn't a standalone allocation for facility maintenance. All right, Brian, let's jump to page 73. The report is, I think, about 100 pages long, so we're going to target specific things they called out for those who haven't seen it yet and get your feedback. So this is some of the examples that they provided. In CSA's recommendations, they would call out these items as fair or even poor. Uh, Things such as they've called out non-functioning drinking fountains, cleaning supplies like you see here, like the can of spray, Lysol spray. Some of these pictures have air fresheners. These items can be dangerous to children. They should be in locked storage areas. But they found them in their evaluations and just walking the school site, they may have been out in the open in some cases. They also found daisy chaining and power. You can flip through a couple more screens if you want, Brian, going up to 81. You'll see a variety of things they've called out as poor and fair. Locked fire extinguisher cabinets with no visible way to open it, no handles on there. These are their findings versus what the school district rated themselves as throughout, and they do this for every category on the fit. You'll see in this report side by side. They call out daisy chaining of things like power strips, damaged or stained carpets, damaged plaster or paint. So we're seeking your feedback on those, how you might address those in the fit. Would you agree these would rate a facility as poor if you saw these on a campus? If you want to provide feedback, feel free to use your raise hand and we can unmute you as well as you're looking to speak up. We also take written feedback. I'll provide an email link after this at the end of this meeting that you can email us feedback as well.
We have another question. It says, I think that is the problem. Oftentimes, the maintenance department is an afterthought and the last to be funded. In order for true change to occur, more emphasis needs to be placed on CBOs and superintendents to provide adequate funding. I guess that's more of a statement. We thank you for that input, though.
And that is related to that. There are separate recommendations by the auditor to the legislature in terms of what they recommend for funding. Let's go back to page 73, Brian. Um, let's use the raise hand feature on this one. I guess by show of hands, how many would consider these automatically jumping to a poor rating on a facility? And the reason why I asked that question is when our 2021 stakeholder meetings, when we talked about cleanliness of a facility and how they appeared, one of the common things and the reason we added comment boxes to the fit was to speak to timing of an evaluation. One of the school districts responded that, they did their fit several months before California auditors came in. And while things may have been clean at the time they evaluated their facilities, maybe a teacher walked in and cleaned it, say over the summer, and brought in their cleaning supplies to clean it. So timing does make a difference in there.
Looks like we have
I see
roughly
five votes for kind of a poor rating. I'm gonna
yeah.
lower your hands.
There may have been about 6 or 7 unique votes.
One of the other things we think is a reason that school districts may have rated themselves good in this particular category for hazardous materials on the day of the inspection. Maybe they told that teacher, put that Lysol away in a locked cabinet, and then now it's done, it's fixed, and they marked themselves as good. Um, I guess from a show of hands, how many would think that's a more correct way to address the assessment of your facilities?
Like about 7 or 8.
A little bit higher.
A little bit higher.
So as we look for recommendations on how we change the fit, and probably in our guidelines doc too, we'll want to speak to those kind of things.
We do have some additional questions. There's about 3 of them. I'll start with the first one. Could the information gathered via the FIT be applied towards the 5-year master plan, i.e., deferred maintenance planning?
That's been a recommendation as part of our Prop 2 implementation. Has been recommended that we incorporate the FIT as a required document. What we've done is included in our guidelines doc as definitely things you should include, or we recommend you include as part of your master planning. There is a cost pressure to the district to do those kind of things to clean up and fix items in your FIT. And as part of your master plan, that's a good thing to consider as part of your evaluation.
Yeah, I mean, if it's more information you could use to populate your 5-year master plan, by all means. Next question. When you say, quote, straight to a poor rating, unquote, do you mean an extreme deficiency?
Oh, sorry. There's the little bit of nuances there. So in the individual components, so in the hazardous waste category, you'll first rate an item as okay, deficient, or extreme deficiency, or not applicable, based on the number of good or okay items compared to the number of items rated. So if you had 10 classrooms, 5 were okay, maybe 2 were deficient and 2 were extreme deficiency. Only 5 of those were considered okay. You would get a 50% rating. When you take all 8 categories, sum them together and get a percentage, then you get an overall facility rating of fair, poor, okay, and I think there's a fourth one in there, which I'm forgetting offhand. So in some cases, one extreme deficiency may be enough to swing things to a percentage that'll drop your percentage to another category, and that impacts your overall facility rating. So it is case by case as you score through it, but it is possible that extreme deficiencies really lower your score into the poor category.
There's a comment from Jose Velasco. He says, the biggest item I find are items, quote, keep out of reach of children, like hand sanitizers. They are everywhere.
Yeah,
I
that
think.
was something noted in the CSA audit report. Post-COVID, their audits occurred last year, so they know that cleaning supplies were quite prominent, in all the facilities they went to. How should that be addressed? And they recommend that our guidance kind of look at those kind of things. So, how should I treat those hand sanitizers when I'm rating a facility conditions as clean, safe, and functional? So that's something else we'll need to consider too.
And then there's another question. Were all the school systems in this report self-conducted, or did any use a third party? I don't think we know.
If you mean in the CSA report, it was the actual CSA auditors that visited all 18 schools. So they toured them, they rated them, and then they provided the scores they used in the fit on the ratings, and then they did the side by side on the document.
And we have another comment. The hazmat items in the photos, I think the ones I'm showing on the screen now, point towards practices and behaviors, not the condition of the facility. Therefore, that item shouldn't point to the rating of that facility.
Yeah, we'll note that, and that's something CSA not noted as how we address those in our guidelines.
Then Yuri has a question. Wouldn't it make more sense to have separate reports for the following categories: maintenance, custodial cleanliness, and safety from the perspective of ratings?
We take a look at that.
Yeah, thank you for that input. Jesse's asking, is it exemplary? Is that the highest rating? I believe so.
We didn't screenshot those four categories, huh?
I
Yeah,
don't
I
think
think you're correct. I think
I
that is the
believe
fourth
that.
one.
Yeah, I think that's where it's labeled. John comments, we cannot control what teachers bring in or how they store these items. Normally don't get any backup from admin for this. That's noted. Thank you.
Yeah. And some of the school district responses that they do mention they have rules in place. They specify to the teachers what they are allowed to do and not to do. And that was their explanation for having some of these items out. The
Yeah.
CSA auditor also pointed out though some of these were commercial cleaners provided by the school district as well in these examples.
Those are things maybe with your input we could incorporate to some sort of guidelines to help with you when you're filling the form out. Eleanor asks, you have been asking if these examples would result in poor ratings. However, we depend the accumulated rating to produce a percentage. Should we be making a superseding decision?
I think that goes back to some of the feedback from the CSA auditor and their opinions on some modifications to the fit. So accounting for multiple deficiencies in one facility or multiple across the campus is something that fits the fit doesn't do. So they think some kind of rating system for that and account for quantities as well. So we'll also be taking a look at how we address that. Some of ideas there could be a fit form for every building on campus and then accumulate each of those buildings add up to one. It'd be more work at the school district level. We can break out categories. We broke out the cleanliness category as an individual worksheet. So we can break out systems as an individual worksheet, electrical as its own worksheet. We could have, 15 worksheets as well, that have individual classrooms on there.
So someone pointed out for me, and I have it up on the screen now. The ratings are down there at the bottom of the screen that you're seeing right now: exemplary, good, fair, and poor, and it has the corresponding percentages there as well.
Thank you.
I think we have a hand raised, Manuel Cavazos. I'm going to unmute you if you'd like. Oh, he put his hand down. Okay, never mind. If you do have a question, though, feel free to raise your hand. We can call on you. Amy asks, is there a new tool or form to use for the fit grading? If so, when will it be available? We did take down our online version of the fit. We're reprogramming that into our OPSC online application. We're working on that currently, but we do have an Excel version and a PDF version on our website. The Excel version will do all the calculations for you. If you search on our website for a facility inspection tool, it'll take you right to them. Hema has a comment. Hazardous materials, chemical waste, and flammable materials that are accessible to children pose a threat to pupils and staff and should be extreme. It should be an extreme deficiency. Thank you for that. Amna says, is it possible for Group 2 or for Prop 2 funds to help fund maintenance rather than go to funding the actual capital improvement? As a state, we are good at constructing buildings and very bad at maintaining them. So
Um,
he's asking if
Proposition 2 does have a modernization funding component based on the age of the buildings. So if you have permanent buildings over 25 years old, you have portable buildings over 20 years old, those do generate modernization program funding. School districts are, it's a local decision to apply for those fundings. The funding is school site specific, so you have to look at the school age buildings and the site specifically, and they're only available once every 25 to 20 years, depending on building type. But it is up to the school district how they spend those modernization funds. They can use them for things like full HVAC replacement, painting, technology, um, upgrades to their systems. But that is a local level decision, and Prop 2 funds can be used for that.
Janelle asks, does OPSC have any data or sense of what percentage of LEAs use their own facilities inspection form versus the fit?
Yeah, no, we don't collect the forms. We don't see them at all from our office. Once we create the fit, it's just there available for school districts to use. That's a good question because there's a second question along the lines, but maybe from a show of hands, how many people here you do the fit themselves? So you're a school district, you're a COE, you actually walk the sites and fill out the fit form or your local instrument.
Lots of hands going up. About 25 so far, 22.
Good. Lots of practitioners. That's out of 124 roughly people externally.
Yeah.
Okay, we're lower hands and a different question. How many people use a third-party contractor to conduct their inspections for them?
A few hands going up, 4 or 5.
For those five, if you're willing to speak up or put in the Q&A, is there any particular reason you hire contractors? Is it because the form's difficult, because of your quantity of schools? Would anybody care to speak to that? All right.
Next comment. To be clear, the ratings the schools reported. Do we know if their staff or a third party did the original inspection? It'll be interesting to know the accuracy of these when they contract them out versus internal staff having conducted them. Yeah, that kind of goes to what we were just talking about. We don't track that, but it does appear just from who we have in the meeting today that the majority are using their own staff to do it. Currently, what are the outcomes of one or multiple poor inspections at the district?
We don't track that either. Since we don't see the reports, we wouldn't know that kind of information.
Yeah, there is a place in the form where you're asked to enter kind of a plan to address the deficiencies. So I would guess that if people are using the form completely, they would indicate there what they'd be doing about it. Let's see. John says, I think each category score should represent the overall status of the site and not pick apart each room that brings the category score down. This should be taken into account by the inspector.
I have a follow-up question for that. So maybe show of hands. In 2021, 2022, when we updated the fit, we added a lot more comment boxes. How many people use those comment boxes and the extra fields? They're optional. They weren't mandatory, but to provide that context to the ratings. The other thing we got feedback forward and the purpose of those comment boxes was to allow school districts to put in that fit their plan for fixing them too. So if there was an extreme deficiency called out and marked, the school district can actually write that, this is on our plan to fix, in the next 3 months, whether it be a re-roofing project, what have you. Okay, some.
Quite a few hands, yeah. Saw as many as 14. Heather says, we have assisted districts in my firm simply because they do not have adequate staffing or staff with knowledge of how to rate the forms objectively. And then Amna adds, the reason they hire consultants is to eliminate bias.
Thank you. Good to know.
We have another comment from an anonymous attendee. We do it ourselves with a maintenance staff of 5 when doing inspections for almost all schools in our county. While school is in operation, often with students mid-lesson, it can be very hard to catch every detail across so many categories. With the tight timeline, schools want their reports. It's very hard to make sure to do deep inspections. It also feels like there's pressure from admins not to fail schools.
Thank you.
Yuri has a comment. This is more of a comment, Michael. You know that I frequently advocate for small school districts regarding resources. In many cases of small school districts, there is no maintenance department. You usually have one maintenance or custodial employee that is completing these forms between custodial duties. Additionally, there is inherent tension between what is being reported here because this information is reported on the SARC, the School Accountability Report Card, and may reflect poorly on schools for the community-facing documents. This is compounded by the fact that, pardon me, this is compounded by the fact that smalls receive minimal resources because of size. They receive no money for maintenance or facilities. These districts must take funds out of basic education services to complete maintenance projects. Noted.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you, Yuri. Those are many of the comments that CSA provided too in their report to the legislature and their recommendations. They also have a series of graphs in the report that kind of show the proportional ratings and how they got better with the more cleaning and maintenance staff assigned to a school site based on, I think, square footage is what they used in their graphs too. So they kind of show the same thing.
Jesse comments, we put a comment for every noted deficiency, so the district knows what we saw and can hopefully fix before next year. We also put observations for smaller items like a single light out, but not a deficiency. We do observe it so they know, though. It's good to know. Amy is asking when is it being updated and when the new version will be available. I don't know if we have a timeline for the OPSC online version. We're working on it currently. I don't know if we know exactly when that'll be available.
Most likely it'll come after this updates. That way we're not reprogramming everything for everybody. As we program the new version of Fit, whatever we take to the board this year, that'll be programmed to OPSC Online. Our goal is to make it kind of a long-term repository to collect the information. A lot of you guys do it in different formats, different versions. If you do it in the OPSC Online system, though, it'll be saved in our records kind of forever.
Someone comments the state needs to dictate school districts to provide funding for maintenance, both in resources and staff. Otherwise, school districts won't. It shouldn't be left as a local level decision. Thank you for that input. Someone else says, our district currently has a hard time editing the fit due to something showing as a macro and unable to edit the document.
If you have those issues, feel free to reach out to our office. The fit form and the Excel form that's available on our website and that we send to people. The macros are there to do the automated calculations that are in the Excel file based on counting all the ratings using the cleanliness worksheets. So it's because of that automation. If you do have trouble using the macros or your IT administration won't let you turn on macros in Excel, on the, I believe it's the second page of the fit form, it'll tell you how to manually do the calculations by summing each category and doing the presentations. So that's an alternate method for doing the scoring too as well. But yeah, won't let you, your IT admin won't let you turn on macros. The auto summing won't work. When we have OPSC Online as a web-based version, the macros will go away, and in theory, that'll calculate automatically for you that way instead. So it should get easier. And then we can export to the PDF so you can save it in your local records.
What deliverables does OPSC expect to result from this process? Simply updates to the fit form or other deliverables. There are issues regarding incentives. resources, etc., that can't be raised or addressed merely by tweaking the fit form?
Yeah, so we have two goals, two large goals here. Is one is to bring back a recommended changes to the fit, presuming there are some based on feedback from our stakeholders and our review of the auditor's recommendations. The second is a deliverable would be a guidelines document. So in addition to instructions, which for most of the fields on the fit currently, there's only 2 or 3 sentences. So our goal is to provide a guidelines document that more comprehensively elaborates on each of those categories and talks about the other considerations within those categories that may not have considered, along with those new items that the CSA recommended regarding specialized facilities like your wood shops and your welding shops and stuff, what have you. So those are our two main deliverables.
Not seeing any other questions at the moment.
Let's jump to one second. Oh, page 111, Brian. So on page 111 of the PDF, is part of the auditor's recommendations. They provided a visual example of what they mean by modifications to the fit. So we wanted to see if there's any initial feedback or thoughts on that. Whoops, sorry, maybe I got the wrong page. Oh, 131. There's our intro and the next page. So oh, sorry, we got to rotate that one. There you go. All right. So in the CSA's recommendations, they added what they called a minor deficiency category. So stains on the ceilings, cracked floor tile is not really a health safety hazard, and including something like that as part of a rating system. The second thing they've kind of demonstrated there is break out the averaging of categories, keep all 15 separately. And what that means is no individual category impacts another one directly. And then as a totality, you can look at the overall ratings of those components. So seeing what you think about that one.
On the comments, a lot of our deficiencies arise from operational use of the facility rather than maintenance items, such as a daisy chain or a blocking of electrical panels or hazardous materials being left out. How can this process help the maintenance staff communicate to principals how to change their staff, how their staff utilizes the space?
Might be seeking feedback from those else on this call that might want to take that. But I think that is at a local level kind of how to handle that.
Yeah, I mean it's something that maybe you could coordinate at the local level for things that that are identified in a fit. The administration of the district would have to coordinate with their site, the principals or the site administrators to coordinate those types of things. For anyone out there wondering if you'd like to see this PDF in whole, I believe we have some links in the chat, but you can also go to our website under the meetings tab. And if you scroll down just a little bit, you should be able to find the full version of the PDF that I'm sharing right now. Hemis says, FYI, to help with calibration and implementation, Cash issued 2 guidebooks that include examples of deficiencies, tips for filling out the fit, going beyond the fit, Facilities, best practices, and resources for each of the 15 categories. It's simple and easy to follow.
We can we work with CASH regularly, the Coalition for Adequate School Housing. We work with them regularly, so we can reach out to them, see what's in their guidebook and what they would offer to let us use as a start for our guidelines. So we can consider that.
Hey, Michael, we have a comment in the room.
Okay, go for it.
All right. This is Ian Padilla with the Coalition for Adequate School Housing. Thank you, Hema, for flagging the cash resources on this issue. I didn't want to make a shameless pitch, but thank you for doing that, Hema. Yes, so just a quick kind of a summary of where those came from. When the FIT was being developed from the IEI, and once it was developed, at that time, there was even more questions than there are now, right, about what was going to be happening here. So the FIT guidebook is a supplemental resource that does exactly as Hema describes. And so it goes through all the 8 categories, and it'll help you. It'll help make it somewhat more simple. And also the going beyond the FIT category. We saw even back then that there are certain requirements, and then there will be more requirements coming forward and other priorities. So that kind of speaks to some of those best practices. So yes, the CASH would definitely fully engaged, as you know, in this issue, and would be happy to share that with you, make it, discuss it, whatever. It is available free of charge on the CASH website. Last thing I'll say is, as a result of this process, we are very likely to update that. The FIT. We've tried to keep it as current as possible. We updated it during COVID for some of those specific cleanliness and issues, but we definitely intend to do that going forward. So that's all to say. Happy to work with you going forward, and we can share whatever experience, resources, and expertise to help this process. So thank you.
Thank you, Ian. We appreciate that. All right, I have a few more questions for the group. So, based on the CSA's audit recommendations and what we saw there on page 131, does anybody have any thoughts, preferences on the current FIT scoring system and the weighting of the categories versus what CSA is recommending, and get rid of all those subbing out and averaging? They were broken out previously back in 2006, and it was determined as part of the stakeholder work group and field testing that weighting actually was better than breaking out the categories. But here we are 15 years later. What are people's thoughts on that? Is it not making sense from a practitioner standpoint and where your ratings are rolling out versus what you think they should be? All right, seeing no comments, feel free to send some thoughts in writing though if you have any follow-up on that one. Same thing, their recommendation to add other categories for minor deficiency. Maybe we even have cosmetic marked on there as another one that they didn't include but was commented on. We welcome feedback on that one.
Someone mentions, is unanchored furniture, it's a common issue we see, a deficiency. Is it a safety? It's a safety issue, but not strictly laid out as a deficiency? I don't think I've seen that mentioned myself.
I don't believe so.
Not related to a deficiency anyways.
Right.
John comments that he thinks the weighting, the way they have it now, is fine. Scott says, can you compare the 2 different results if you weight versus didn't weight? Yeah, that's something we could probably do.
We could try, yeah.
Yeah, we can look at that for next meeting. Thank you. Andra says, How could the fit be adapted to include issues that might be seasonal and might not show up on that specific day, but are still issues? In particular, issues related to climate impacts, extreme heat or freeze, extreme wind, sea level rise, high tide days, storm-based flooding, or air pollution.
Yeah, those kind of things came up during our 21-22 discussions that time of day made a big difference. If, you had a massive rainstorm and the next day you're doing your fit evaluations, there could be a lot of mud tracked all over the place, flooding and pooling of water on campus, which was called out by CSA as a deficiency on their on a school site. Um, we had landed in 21-22. The evaluators should use the comments to weigh in on that kind of stuff to note that, a recent rainstorm followed the evaluation, and that's why there was pooling of water, or that's why, it was muddier than usual, or the janitors hadn't come through yet to clean up.
Someone else mentions the untethered furniture. They say we had that come up this year also with bookcases not being secured to the wall. Omnis says it would be nice to separate maintenance item and operational items. Right now, it's by components, and it takes time to extract the components and turn them into work orders. Okay, that's noted. Thank you. Jose says, I feel that maybe the FIT reports recently steered towards more cleanliness and away from functionality, such as operations of doors and locks, which is critical for security. Okay, that's a great point. Thank you. Scott asked, is there a box to note the weather on the day of the inspection? Is this taken into consideration of results in any way? There are boxes you can put notes, so you could note that. We could consider making that a required field, or not a required field, but something that's very clear, a very clear space for that.
That was actually one of the newest ones. We just added that one specifically for weather conditions. You have to go to the oh, it's on your screen if you zoom in the very center of on the page Brian's in from the current fit. There is a weather conditions at the time of inspection. It is labeled as at the time of the inspection. So if you're commenting on the prior day's weather, you use the bottom box on inspector's comments. But we did note that one too as well.
Right. We added that last time.
Back to Jose's comment, there are under the windows, doors, locks, the last category, evaluation of doors being intact, functional, open and closed, locked design. Those are categories still on the fit. So yes, we did add quite a big page on cleanliness, an entire worksheet for it. And that's largely because of the legislation that passed in 21-21 to consider APPA operational guidelines for that. And that book is heavily focused on cleanliness standards.
Here's another anonymous comment. When I worked at a COE, we had a number of curriculum coordinators who knew nothing about facilities, who had to go do Williams visits. They did not receive any real training, and many had worked in schools that were very poor conditions. So they just saw much of these things as normal. How can there be trainings that could be provided to inspectors or certification to be allowed to inspect, so that it is less biased or confusing for those that might not have training?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the goals of the updates is to ensure that it still stays kind of an objective scoring system. And then in companion with our guidelines, that'll help provide more guidance. Overall, the fit isn't required to be, a formally trained or have expertise in systems as meant as a visual inspection. But I think those guidelines could definitely help along those routes.
Hema comments, I agree that calibration is necessary throughout the state. In support of the last comment, I believe. James says the new minor deficiency category. To be clear, this could be used for a single and very minor stain, or is the intent for multiple small deficiencies that do not pose hazards?
I think that's a part we'll have to develop and figure out how that rolls up. How you look at each individual building, each individual classroom, and how that rolls up into your overall facility score is all part of the considerations that we're considering here.
Appreciate all the feedback today, everybody. Thank you very much. John says, we had the Williams inspectors calling out electrical hazards for items plugged into power strips. Not sure why that is a hazard for a UL rated device. I'm not sure what that means. These were not daisy chained. When questioned, they took it back to their coordinators and said it was a new requirement.
Yeah, I don't think we possibly weigh on what happened in that particular case. I know here in West Sac in our ziggurat building, when the fire marshals come around, things like mini refrigerators, those are not allowed to be plugged into power strips. They got to be protected. They got to be plugged directly into wall outlets. So it could be related to that and fire code. We also had, I received a question. An inspector had called out that the school district was deficient on their Williams report because they not have enough fire extinguishers in their building. The instructions on our fit say you have to have a fire extinguisher in each classroom as applicable. We weren't in the form, we weren't saying that you have to have one in every classroom. It means if the law requires it, based on the local fire code, and this person being a firefighter know that the local law for having fire extinguishers, there's a distance requirement and some other ones, not necessarily in every classroom, but there were distance requirements related to it. So we will take a look at that language too and making clear on how you're rating and scoring.
We have a question. Will you provide clarification on fire extinguishers? Does a fire extinguisher need because our local fire does not? I think they're trying to say, does it need to be provided, or their local fire department does not require it?
Yeah, so yeah, that goes to my comment. It refers to local jurisdictions there.
Someone else comments that education code requires one in every classroom. Why isn't this required on the fit?
So the fit doesn't set requirements, it's just how to evaluate it and score it.
And then also related to this, fire code is separate from ed code, and ed code is more stringent. Is a comment from Jay Ruddle.
That's good to know.
Someone else says, we also get an electrical hazard for Cat 5 wire exposed in wire mold. Another example of eye of the beholder evaluation ratings. Cosmetic issues seldom equal a safety issue or a functionality problem. Jay Ruddle also mentioned that our auditor called out that every classroom requires an extinguisher. Someone says the fit inspection needs to help and provide clarity. Therefore, it should be taken into consideration what ed code states.
Let's see. Okay, just a couple more questions for me as to inform us. So in 21-22, we created the new cleanliness detail sheet, which added numerous categories, I think 15 of them, 15 in total, just for the cleanliness as a more detailed evaluation that goes classroom by classroom, building by building on 15 different categories of cleanliness across the entire campus. Then, based on those scores, it rolls up to determine your rating as a facility for deficiency or okay or extreme deficiency. Is there a desire by all of you to create something similar to that, but one for each category here? So meaning also do the same thing for electrical, for HVAC, sewer, gas lines, Or would you find that overly burdensome and troublesome to actually implement and use? Or would that make it easier by having more detail to help you determine your scoring?
Not seeing any hands. Couple of them. Someone comments that be overly burdensome. We have, let's see.
Oh, sorry. One person asked to repeat the question. So right now, and sorry, I don't have a live example on screen, but when you're looking at each of these categories that Brian has on screen here, the cleanliness column specifically, you could just use this page as it is to count, in those four boxes there. Alternatively, as an option in 21-22, we changed the fit. We added a whole spreadsheet for the cleanliness column that broke it out into more detail. So there's 15 columns rating floor cleanliness, wall cleanliness, desk, counters, furniture, lights, landscaping, bathrooms, toilets. So every little part of a facility on each one's cleanliness. Collectively, you take those 15 categories and you got a score that would determine whether you would rate that particular classroom as clean or not. And then across that classroom, it would also sum across each individual classroom, your gym, and total them up. And based on the grand total, that would roll up to this page that Brian's showing for cleanliness to rate your score. So a lot more detail to roll up, but it would take into account one area dirty versus your entire campus and call it a deficiency. Not enough to skew your entire score. So a lot more data, but obviously a lot more work to fill out, especially if you do it across all 15 categories that we have on screen here too as well.
Two additional comments related to what we were talking about just a minute ago, that it's too much, and then it would significantly increase the inspection time per site. And then someone comments, I have found the overall cleanliness spreadsheet rarely changes a deficiency to an okay. Gabriel says it's overly complicated. In reality, this will lead to less reliable data due to time constraints. Someone asks, it's difficult to respond to these questions on the spot. Would it be possible to see the questions in writing? Yeah, we'll summarize all the feedback for the next meeting, definitely. Someone comments, I think it'd be helpful if the guidelines document could address what we are required to review. For example, if there are items that the fire inspector or health inspector would review, should we also be reviewing those? I review facilities as the Williams coordinator for our county, and a few times when I called out something, the school staff walking with me said the health inspector or fire inspector reviewed their site and the finding I called out was okay.
Yeah, we could take a look at that.
Someone comments that safety issues should be the main focus. How clean and organized should stay at a site level or be generalized.
Yeah. And just a reminder of that one, though, however, statute requires 3 categories: clean, safe, and functional. So 3 different requirements to be reviewed.
Kristen comments, the only problem we have is that cleanliness option or the cleanliness opinion of one person differs from another. That's a good point.
Depends if you're a parent or not, huh?
Yeah. A couple other comments. With so many cleanliness details, it feels like a separate report. So much data is so hard to do all at once. And then as long as it's an optional, like the custodial worksheet, Ken is okay with it. Scott says cleanliness is too variable throughout the year. Do the inspection right after a summer deep clean. You have one result 2 months into the school year, a different result.
That was the feedback provided. Some of the school districts are reviewed by the CSA auditor too, along those same lines.
And then someone comments, yes, it's more work. However, it does align more to the audit mentioned APPA scale. It's true. Anonymous attendee, my input is that the state is requiring districts to complete a fit inspection. It's not, it should not be wishy-washy, meaning it dictates what good repair is, but then leaves how this is accomplished to the local level. There needs to be a cross-functionality and also funding associated with it. As stated, most districts are operating on very little maintenance staff. Kristen comments, for safety, one issue we have is that so many teachers cover walls with paper. How could we address this in a manner that clearly affects the site score?
Take a look at that. All right. That is all the prepared questions I had. We at this time welcome any additional comments, feedback, something not covered so far regarding the fit.
Someone does mention that the local fire inspector can help with paper issues. Good to know. Jose mentions we have had great results in having custodial leads participate in the fit as they know what cleanliness standards are throughout the year. That's a good idea.
Here's more of a poll question, show of hands. How many of you are from school districts that have set your cleanliness standards and what level you're trying to hit based on APPA guidelines? And for those of you unaware, the APPA guide kind of outlines multiple levels of cleanliness. And then based on the cleanliness level you're trying to hit and the size of your facilities, it kind of makes recommendations onto the number of staff you have or custodial maintenance staff you have to take care of that to reach that level based on those standards. And it's kind of what was part of a discussion of our 21-22 item.
Karen asks, can you align your review and collaboration with Cash on a more robust fit guidebook?
Certainly.
And then Eleanor put a code section into the chat. It's California Fire Code Title 24, Part 9, 807.5.2.3, and it relates to artwork in classrooms. I'm assuming that it will kind of show exactly what can or can't be used there.
Raised hand. Atticott? Badicott? No. Thank you. All right. Ryan, you want to jump to page 8? Right. One more comment. You can also leverage your risk management team and insurance care inspections to help drive a conversation around classroom safety concerns. Okay. We'll leave it open the meeting for a little bit longer for those that want to provide comments. All your questions and answers we do export, so we'll save those and go back to them and refer to them as we consider next steps for this item. We do anticipate bringing something back to another stakeholder meeting with kind of summarizing all the feedback and kind of determining next steps from there. We're looking for anyone who wants to provide written feedback because you didn't get a chance to today. Our email address is there on the bottom, OPSC communications at dgs.ca.gov. Ideally, you can send that by the end of the day, November 14th. It is an ongoing process, but in order to us have enough time to respond to it for the next meeting, that's our desire at that particular point. You can send those to that team, and we will incorporate into our future items. Amy asked, will this recording meeting be available? Yes. Probably within a day or two, you can go to our meetings webpage on our website and there's some accordions at the bottom of the page. Those will have all our YouTube links to this video. So it is webcast. It will be the transcripts will be there. Well, it's only webcast. And those links will be in future items provided links to as well. So, and OPSC does have a YouTube page with all our stakeholder meetings. So if you subscribe to our YouTube page, you'll get notifications when we do post that video, but it should just take a day or two.
Ken mentions that cleanliness standards are directly aligned with funding for custodial staff. If the state is going to dictate a standard, they must dictate appropriate funding and staffing.
Thank you for the comment. All right, any other comments or questions? All right, almost 80 Q&A questions posed in there. We thank you for all your feedback today. We do appreciate it. As I mentioned before, we did not have initial recommendations on how we're going to approach this, but based on your feedback, we'll take that back and take a look at what we can do. Also on this page that Brian is sharing is our email address. So if you subscribe to our email list, we will let you know when the next meeting we'll have. And other than that, we thank you for your time today. Have a good day, everyone.